Thank you, Nick. Well, let's introduce our Newsnight panel tonight. Labour peer Lord Maurice Glasman, Guardian columnist and author of the new novel The Traitor's Circle, Jonathan Freedland, and over from the US, the former Republican Party spokeswoman Elizabeth Pipko. Welcome to you all. Of course, I want to get into the politics and the consequences of all of this. But Elizabeth, I wanted to ask you first, on a personal level, Charlie Kirk was somebody that you knew. It must be an incredibly upsetting time.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly upsetting is probably the only way I can describe it on air. I have just stopped crying, and I will try to not cry tonight on the show. I think thank you, it's the way he died also. I mean, something that gruesome happening to someone you knew personally, who you know deep down was a brilliant, genuine human being who didn't deserve any harm, let alone to go out like that, knowing what his family is probably feeling and knowing what thousands of people around the world are now feeling, whether they liked him politically or not, because if they know this could happen to him, it could happen to anybody else.
And what was he like to you?
Yeah, he was, I don't want to put it too lightly. I want people to understand I don't shy away from criticizing people in my own party. We have a lot of problems with our politicians on both sides of the aisle. Charlie was not someone that anyone should have a problem with. He was genuine, he was real, he was committed. Every single thing that came out of his mouth, he actually meant, which is shocking in politics. He believed in everything he said, from religion to his love for the country. He truly wanted to debate people who disagreed with him. He loved to talk to people who disagreed with him. He wanted them to change his mind. He wanted to learn and grow. He hoped that he could do that for other people as well. And I think he represented what could have been a really, really, really incredible movement that's now been taken away from us.
You know the Trump family well. Let's have a look, though, at Donald Trump as this nation's leader and how he has responded, what Mehdi Hassan was saying there about, and we saw the clip, him explicitly blaming the radical left political violence before anything is actually known about the suspect. Was that responsible, do you think?
I'm glad that you prefaced it by saying that I know him and I know the family. Look, I have been around President Trump since 2015, so I have literally lived this with them. What I have experienced, probably like Mehdi, you know, as someone who is vocal on TV, has been horrible, but nothing compared to what I've seen that family have to go through. And I understand where he's coming from. I do think both sides have made huge mistakes. I need to tone it down. But what I saw begin in 2015 against Donald Trump is where I believe this started. I don't think if anyone, you know, shied away from calling Donald Trump Hitler 10 years ago, we would be where we are right now. So
words do matter.
Words 100% matter, but I fear the left started it, and I fear when Mehdi says, I haven't seen the left say anything, Barack Obama did the right thing. Yeah, thank God Barack Obama said the right thing, but there are thousands of people online celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder who all identify as on the left.
Does all America, actually all Americans of all sides, have to reflect on their phraseology, on how they speak to each other going forward?
100%. I will never watch what I watched yesterday and say that I'm never going to think about what comes out of my mouth. I mean, no one should get hurt anywhere in the world, but in America, for stating your views out loud, no one should ever be hurt. And if I had any tiny piece to do with any of that, I don't know how I would live with myself. So every single person has a responsibility, 1,000%. But people should know, people who go on TV like me, people who are in the media, people who are elected officials, they have a different kind of responsibility because there are young, impressionable people who literally follow their words and do what they do because of what they learned by watching us.
Maurice Glasman, if I could bring you in, you were at the inauguration, you've done your own research into the MAGA movement, you know them probably better than any Labour politician. What's your assessment of how the response will develop from that side in light of what's happened?
Yeah, I think MAGA, Elizabeth, are working. Elizabeth expressed it quite. They are working with an idea that a certain kind of left have taken over university institutions, the media, that they allowed the demonization of Donald Trump, you know, parallels with Hitler being very familiar in mainstream newspapers. And then there's also the growth in America of Antifa, which is explicitly violent and terroristic. That's nothing to do with the Democratic leadership, but that's an aspect and a really strong culture, which you can see in The Guardian on Below the Line, of real hate, real vilification of people who dare to transgress against the progressive Holy Grail.
Jonathan Freedland, you recorded your podcast today. Just set this in historical terms for us, if you will, the context around political assassinations in the US.
Yeah, I'll just say something about the Guardian Below the Line. It's heavily moderated, so those voices aren't allowed to be published. But I think this does show you there is a mismatch and an imbalance, because Elizabeth's quite right. There are people on social media accounts pushing out this kind of bile, but you don't hear that at the very top level, at the leadership level. Yes, random people online are saying terrible things. The difference, the mismatch, is that the senior figures in the Republican world are talking this way. So whether it is, as you heard Mehdi say, Elon Musk talking about the Democrats of the left as the party of murder, or Jesse Waters of Fox News saying we will avenge Charlie's death, it's coming from the very top, and I think that point with Donald Trump is the key one. Look, historically, this is a country, as I think Nick said at the start, that has had violence encoded in its DNA from the start. That's absolutely obviously true. The most famous example, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, 160 years ago. But if you look at an eruption in our lifetime, for example, in the 1960s, what you did then see from the highest levels were these calls for national unity, for healing. You didn't have a president getting stuck in, getting stuck in to the fight, saying it's only one side. That is the new development. And I think, you don't have to make facile parallels with Donald Trump and so on, but to have him as a partisan in these battles, saying this is the radical left, ignoring the political violence that has come, as it were, from his own side, not speaking about it. That is the new feature, and that is why people are worried, I think.
Elizabeth?
Highly disagree. Look, I applaud everyone for doing the right thing when a person was, murdered in the most gruesome way I think I've ever seen in my life. But in Donald Trump's first term, plenty of elected Democrats celebrated when Sarah Sanders was kicked out of a restaurant. Maxine Waters said, go out and get them in the street where you see them. They have been telling their supporters to do this long before Donald Trump got into the Oval Office the first time.
But getting kicked out of a restaurant isn't, with all due respect, the same as what we're talking about with violence. So when, for example, there was an attempt to kidnap Nancy Pelosi from her home, and her husband, an 82-year-old man, Paul Pelosi, was violently assaulted, what was Donald Trump's reaction? Was it to condemn political violence? It was to make jokes about it.
But wasn't that 6 years later?
No.
This started in 2015 when Donald Trump ran, and they said he was Hitler and we should treat him like Hitler.
No, I think random people online did that. You won't find senior Democrats.
That's not true.
Senior leadership people saying we should treat him like Hitler.
They said that they told their supporters that he was Hitler.
When
That's not true.
Kamala Harris was asked whether she thought that Donald Trump was a fascist. She said yes.
She said yes.
Well, I would agree.
I'm talking about senior levels.
Yeah, but I think there are fascist traits to what we are seeing now when you are concentrating power in various places, in the centre rather, and one by one eviscerating rival centres of power. But that isn't the same as saying...
This is the issue, because they see on their side that the thought police, the lanyard class, the clampdown on free speech, not being able to speak, academics losing their jobs for expressing freedom. This is a very intense culture war going on. You're right. All my heroes in American history have been shot. Abraham Lincoln, Robert Kennedy, Huey Long, who's beloved of
Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump, that's the key in the election. Donald Trump, no, not one of my heroes, but that moment where he was shot at that rally, I think that was a turning point in the election.
Can I also just add, it wasn't just towards Donald Trump. What changed in 2016 was that it wasn't just towards him like before. It was towards his supporters and his staff. AOC retweeted someone who was sharing not only the information, but the addresses and the names of everyone who worked for Donald Trump so they could never work again and so they could be targeted. This is what I went through 10 years ago. I guarantee you it is not what you think it is. They started this long before Donald Trump ever won that first election.
Jonathan Friedland, I'd like to ask you what history tells us about what happens next. You've got your new book out, The Traitor's Circle. It's an example of what happens when extreme polarisation can run rampant.
Yeah, The Traitor's Circle is set in a very different period. I would want to underline that. It is in the 1940s, it's in the Third Reich. I'm not making some facile parallel now. The book doesn't talk about America today. But it does talk about a group of very elite, high society Germans, aristocrats who did defy Hitler, and they gathered together and they were in the end betrayed from within by someone they thought was one of their own. But one of the key lessons that come out of it is, first, that when these attacks happen, you have to be very frightened if the authorities seize on them to justify some kind of crackdown that they already had in mind. That is a real thing to watch out for. It did happen in that case. But the other big lesson is that you don't have much time. If you are fearful for the liberal democratic institutions, the guardrails, they can be dismantled with extreme speed. You don't have to go back to the 1940s to see this. You see it in Erdogan's Turkey, you see it in Orban's Hungary. I think if people are worried right now at the concentration of power, Donald Trump's really quite relentless attempt to remove anything which might act as a check or balance on his power, you need to act right now, because there isn't much time. I think that's a lesson even from the period that my book is set in the 1940s.
And Elizabeth, are you hopeful? We've got people like Steve Bannon talking about war. There's a lot of rhetoric, violent rhetoric out there as a result of this. Where are the voices on the Republican side calling for conciliation? Are you one of them?
I'm one of them. Look, this happened so recently. Like I said, I just stopped crying. I'm not calling for any war. I'm not calling for anything except for both sides to just realize that if we ever witness this again, I don't know if the country will survive at all. What happened to Charlie Kirk should never have happened to anyone. He didn't deserve it, but America doesn't deserve that. And I don't think we could survive this happening again. I don't know if we'll survive this one. I really don't know what happens next. And God forbid we escalate any further.
OK, well, do stay with us, but I do just want to take a quick look at a few of the stories on the front pages. And when I say a few, I actually really mean one.